Good afternoon. Come on, we can start a little better than that. And welcome to Public Health Grand Rounds at the Aspen Institute. We're delighted to have you here for this very special session, and I think most timely session, as COVID continues to be front and center in this country, with many people still becoming severely ill, and some suffering its effects, as we will hear shortly, for long periods of time, perhaps even permanently. I am Ruth Katz, Executive Director of the Health Medicine Society program at the Aspen Institute. Health Medicine and Society is sponsor of Public Health Grand Rounds at the Aspen Institute. As many of you know, Grand Rounds is a time-honored feature of medicine designed to keep clinicians up to date about scientific and medical advancements and to promote excellence in research and practice. Public Health Grand Rounds, now in its 9th year at the Aspen Institute, borrows from that tradition to advance knowledge about the cutting-edge public health or population health issues of the day. Today's program is about one of those public health issues that continues to touch so many Americans and their families, long COVID. Not the numbers so much, or the lack of a cure, or the need for more research, but rather about one person's ongoing journey with the condition that, yes, changed his life by imposing limitations, but also brought about new creativity and renewed commitment to the love of music and its powerful impact on us all. Let me then introduce you to today's featured speaker, Joshua Roman. Joshua Roman is a cello soloist and composer who began playing the cello, get this, at age 3. He gave his first public recital at age 10. He's been a superstar musician ever since. Hailed by the New York Times for his, quote, effortlessly expressive tone and playful zest for exploration, as well, in the words of the San Francisco Chronicle, his extraordinary technical and musical gifts and blend of precision and almost improvisatory freedom that goes straight to the heart. Joshua has performed with leading orchestras around the world and collaborated with other superstars such as Yo-Yo Ma and Aspen's own Anna Devere Smith. He has been recognized for his extraordinary work with awards and honors. They are way, way too many for me to mention here. But all this came crashing down when Joshua was hit with COVID, which he continues to experience as one of an estimated 17 million adults in the US with long COVID. Immunity, Joshua's newest project, including his recently released CD by the same name and available here today, is an intimate exploration of Joshua's life-altering experience of ongoing COVID. You will hear all about the project both through performance and in conversation for today's program. Now, the conversation takes place with Dr. Atul Gawande, a superstar of a different sort. Atul is the Assistant Administrator for Global Health at the U.S. Agency for International Development, where he oversees a bureau that manages over $4 billion with a footprint of more than 900 staff committed to advancing the equitable delivery of public health approaches around the world. Prior to joining the Biden-Harris administration, Atul was a practicing surgeon at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and professor at Harvard's School of both Medicine and Public Health. He founded and led a major center for health systems innovation and a nonprofit making surgery safer around the globe. Atul also served as CEO of Haven, an amazing Berkshire Hathaway and JP Morgan Chase healthcare venture, but perhaps you know him best as a former staff writer for The New Yorker, as well as author of 4 New York Times bestsellers, including Being Mortal, All About Living the Good Life. As I said, and I hope you would agree, 2 superstars, actually really even 2 superheroes. That is our program for today's Public Health Grand Round session. We couldn't be more excited and more honored to have Joshua and Atul with us. I think we just simply could not do any better. So thank you. Joshua's coming in a minute. Atul, thank you. Thank you both for being here. We're most grateful that you are able to join us. Now, before we get things underway, this always happens, you know this. There's a few housekeeping rules. Number one, as you can see, we are videotaping the program. It will be up on the Health Medicine Society website within 24 to 48 hours, so you can watch it again and again and again. Our interview will run about 35 minutes or so, after which we will open up the conversation to all of you to take your questions and comments. Please wait until we bring you a mic. We have handheld mics that will be brought directly to you. Before speaking, would you introduce yourself? And if you're affiliated with an institution, we'd appreciate your sharing that as well. Finally, a reminder, and I stress, time is really tight for the question and answer part of the program, and we want to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. So please, please, please be brief and get to the point. With that, many thanks again to Joshua, to Atul for taking time from their incredibly busy schedules to be with us. Thanks as well, you've seen them running around, our staff, Katya and Hugo, who have done all the logistics. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us. It's great to have you here. And with that, it is my great pleasure to bring to the Aspen stage, Joshua Roman.
So I'm Joshua Roman, and that's how my cello says hello. It's something probably most of you, if not all of you, recognize from car commercials or, TV, movies. It's the prelude from the first suite, first solo cello by Johann Sebastian Bach, and the piece that I've played more than any other by far in my life. It's one of my favorites, the only one that you'll catch me playing alone. For myself, just for the pleasure of it. And it's important for me when I'm speaking and sharing things that are so deeply personal to start with something that I've loved as long as I can remember. It was actually almost 4 years ago now that I was facing the very real possibility of never playing this beautiful music again. It was January of 2021 when I first caught COVID, and I still have not fully recovered. I could tell something was wrong when smell and taste came back on the 10th day, but I continued struggling to read. Sometimes even a basic sentence, I couldn't understand it. And then a few weeks later, I was returning home from the trip that I'd been on when I first got sick, and the simple act of walking up the stairs to the bedroom completely laid me out. I only made it halfway before falling to the floor of the landing, unable to continue or even to lift myself into a sitting position. And I was there for something like 30 minutes, frustrated and crying. As Ruth said, it turns out I have long COVID, which we now know causes a host of symptoms and conditions that can differ from patient to patient. Each patient has their own unique, what we call constellation. In my case, to this day, I still experience dysautonomia, trembling that I take medication for. My heart rate will spike to over 200 for no apparent reason. That's better with the medication. Brain fog, which is, I think, an amazing term that means absolutely nothing. But in my specific case, it's about my ability to process information. So anytime layered thinking is involved, even if it's something that used to be easy, like a grocery store or driving, now because those are not as simple as other tasks, I can't do them without suffering a crash. That is, of course, in addition to the extreme fatigue that I carry each day, and that's pretty hard to get used to. I've been talking about this for a little over a year now, and this is probably my favorite moment because it's where I get to actually brag that before all of this, I had gotten my mile back down under 6 minutes. So struggling to get to the top of the subway steps is a far cry from where I was before long COVID. It took me a while to accept the reality of my situation. I had two very important performances that I brute forced my way through after a month of trying to recover. And then I crashed hard. I had nothing ahead on the calendar because COVID, so no concerts, very few concerts, I should say. And I put the cello in the case and I left it there. And when I did, these doubts that I think had been there for a long time, but I had managed to keep under the surface, they started coming up. And I questioned my career choice. I questioned the meaning of what I do. I've always wanted to feel like I make an impact. But with the difficulty that I had even lifting the bow to the string, let alone really practicing, I lost hope that it mattered anyway. There's a moment that I want to share where all of that changed in an instant. But before I do, I have another piece to play. And this one is one that brings a different element than the Bach that I first played, which I think of as joy. And often that is the first thing that springs to mind when I think about playing the cello, my best friend, joy. But there are other sides to music too, just like there are other sides to people. And I feel that it's important to let ourselves sometimes go to those places and experience something that we may not be able to put words to, or maybe we can, but it's too much for us to actually do that or to communicate it to other people. This piece does that. It's by Alison Loggins Hull. It was written as part of a project of music by women for women, and she gave me permission to share it along with the story that inspired the piece. And it is a story that she says is much more common than we would like to think. It's the story of a young girl being sold as a child bride. And in the first section of the piece, she represents the sadness of being taken away, the loss. In the second section, there's frenetic, aggressive energy as this person has to suddenly adjust their entire life and grow up, the responsibilities that come with that when they have no choice. And in the third section, a kind of extremely fatalistic acceptance of what it is. I offer this piece to you along with the story, but the piece and the power that these notes carry in the spirit of catharsis, that whatever it is, wherever it takes you, that matters too, just as much as joy. So, here's Allison's piece, Stolen. how devastatingly beautiful that is. She does such a good job with the cello as the voice of loss, of mourning, something that can be easy to avoid, to push away. So I kind of left us in the dark place in my story, these months of doubt, and it was almost 3 months. It was the beginning of April until almost the end of June, and I'm never going to forget that because what brought me back was guilt. I had promised a friend that I would play for her summer solstice party, and I intended on backing out, but I waited too long. So there I was the day before the party, like, oh no, now it's too late. I really have to do this. So I went to my cello case and I actually literally had to dust it off. The cello is something that I've spent decades playing pretty much every day. You know, if you miss 1 day of practice, you know it. If you miss 2 days, the critics know it. If you miss 3 days, the world knows it. Apparently is what Heifetz said, and that's a motto that I lived by. So when I took it out and my fingers felt creaky and unsure, I wasn't very confident in what would happen. And like I said, it was really guilt that brought me there. But when I started to play, I began with the Bach that I played for you at the beginning. And holding the instrument and feeling the physical sensation of making sound was so powerful that those vibrations moved me to tears. This has been my best friend since I was 3 years old. And I realized in that moment that somewhere along the way, I'd gotten so focused on the external that this idea of a career in music had become about serving by being perfect, by making myself into the kind of machine or vessel that would be a conduit straight from the composer to the audience. But in doing so, I had lost sight of my own need for nourishment and connection through music. Things are very different now. Now I prioritize the vulnerability that caused me to be open in that moment, recognizing that all of the work that I do for technique only matters if at the core there is that openness, that willingness to risk something, to be vulnerable. And I'm not happy about the way that I discovered it, but it's led to some pretty amazing lessons over the last few years. I decided to write a new piece for the project. I'm also a composer, and that was daunting because my brain doesn't really work that way anymore. It's very hard to sit and organize thoughts. And I set out an ambitious plan. I was going to write the piece that says the story of my long COVID journey. It's going to have the initial crash, then lessons along the way, maybe some struggles, soaring heights, and be super clearly, epically everything in less than 5 minutes. So of course I got writer's block and nothing was coming out, so I started improvising. Let's see if we can just get the creative juices flowing. Fun, but not really helping me find that piece, that epic mountain that I was looking for. And it wasn't until 2 days before the recording session for the album, when I was feeling the deadline pressure, that I said, okay, you know what? It's gonna be what it's gonna be. I'm still trying to control. So I am going to let the music lead me rather than trying to dictate what the piece is and write the music that fits that idea. And when I did that, those fun improv sessions immediately coalesced into what is definitively the most joyous piece of music I've ever written. It's got to be in tune for it to be joyful. I think what I learned through that was that I couldn't force myself to write the piece that I wanted, but when I let go, trusted myself, and just played from the heart, I came away with the piece that I actually needed in that moment. Here it is. I've given it the same name as my project, Immunity.
Josh, we just want to let the music talk. But it's public health grand rounds here.
Yes.
So we're going to learn about long COVID a little bit. You talked about crashing. That's not a word that you made up. It's actually a term that of a phenomenon we see in long COVID. What is crashing?
In my body, crashing looks like often an inability to think or speak. I might, in more extreme cases, be unable to lift myself off the ground. I sometimes am also shaking violently and very cold, even though the temperature is just fine, and almost no amount of coats thrown on me will stop the shivering. So it's a complete shutdown caused somehow by the nervous system, and that's where my knowledge ends. And
Well, that phenomenon, which is both frightening and puzzling, is commonly seen in long COVID. So to put this in perspective, long COVID is defined very loosely. It's a diagnosis of exclusion, as we say. But after COVID, about 20 to 30% of people will have symptoms that last longer than the virus tests in their system. That's longer than 4 weeks is the classic definition. But if you take the group who are longer than that, there are 10% or so who will have symptoms lasting more than 6 months. And 2 to 5% will have severely disabling symptoms that last longer than that are affecting their ability to work or to maintain basic activities of daily living. And you're in that 2 to 5%.
yes.
And in that group, those are the people where they try to exert physical activity, even mental activity, and the exertion seems to drain out their abilities to function for a crash. And that's a physical and mental state of being for hours afterwards till you recover. What I'd love to ask is what has been your course of recovery? How did you recover? You went to a COVID clinic, and what did it involve? And then where are you now? You know, what is your touring behind an album? We'll get to the funny way in which you are, but I'd love to hear about first, like, physical advancement.
Right. So one of the complications of my case is that I seem to have a predilection, precondition for catching COVID. So I've had it 4 times. And each of those times, the symptoms, there's been some symptomatic change. For example, one time, suddenly I could read again, which was awesome. And another time I lost the reading at all. I couldn't read at all for almost a year. But my heart rate, my resting heart rate, this is on beta blockers, by the way, dropped from 93 to 63, back where it should be. Still on beta blockers. But those things make it very challenging to have a real progression. But in between, I have often been able to get better at managing the energy I have. A lot of it is just about taking care of myself and doing things we all should, like paying attention to what takes the most energy. And we have a red light, yellow light, green light system. And so if it's a red light activity, only one of those per day, and you can't do too many yellow light activities. You can do all the green light activities you want, but for me, there are so few of those. Listening to music is not one. So I actually, just to make the list a little longer, I put playing dead like a possum on the list because it was pretty depressing. So I recommend it. No phones when you're doing that. And I once got to the point where I felt like I could try running because I'd gotten through the PT protocol to the point with the breathing exercises where I was able to bike in the recumbent bike for 30 minutes with almost no resistance. And so I tried to jog for a few minutes, and I wasn't able to wash the dishes for 36 hours. So that's my peak since January of 2021. Where I'm at currently is that I'm struggling right now, but I'm so accustomed to the signs that I know I'm going to be okay, at least until I get out of the building. I have medication that I took beforehand that I used to take when a crash was coming on, and now I take it in a, what's the word for preventative?
Prophylactic.
Prophylactic, thank you. Prophylactic way, and my Chloe helps me with pretty much everything so that I can save energy for a performance and a chat. But I don't think that I'll be doing the Thursday crossword puzzle today. I don't have anything going on tomorrow, so I'll probably be able to do it then.
This disease came into a musician who'd had an extraordinary background, and that collision, in a way, is what's really interesting to me. You are a renowned classical musician. You were principal cellist for the Seattle Symphony at the age of 22. And then within 2 years, you quit and said, I'm going to do my own thing. And so you have been a concert cellist all along the way, doing your own version of things. Partners, and a lot of interesting partnerships with the DJ. I came across online your partnership with Mason Bates, where he wrote a concerto for you, where you used a guitar pick as part of it, and performed Bach for Ted's Facebook page and garnered 1 million live views. What were you doing? What is it that made you both stay in the classical music tradition, but violate the classical music life?
That's such a great question and framing. I grew up in Oklahoma. Mustang, Oklahoma, very, very small town, 2 miles by 6 miles. And I didn't have access to the classical infrastructure. My parents had studied a little bit of classical music and they loved it, but they're actually church musicians. My dad was the choir director and my mom the accompanist. So music for me was just music. I happened to play the cello, but none of my friends did. So when I did my version of chamber music, it was either with my mom on the piano or with my friends on a guitar, singing, a djembe, what have you. And it just felt very unnatural when I went into conservatory, and it was exciting to suddenly focus on technique above all, but it was very strange to only be playing classical music. And as soon as I got out of conservatory, that began to shift back. I just would basically say yes to anyone who thought the cello would be a good addition to their gathering. And that has made for some pretty interesting collaborations. Through that all, I did struggle to figure out in the world and the industry how it works. How do I distinguish myself in a way that other people can understand? Because when you're running here and doing this thing and that thing, and it's all fun and interesting and you're learning, but that dirty word branding, how do I brand myself? I became the guy that could do anything. So I would get calls when people wanted the guy that can do anything, but I wasn't the first person that they'd think of for anything else. So it's very interesting to me that, and we were talking about this a little bit, that long COVID has forced me to prioritize only the most important things. And that recognition and embrace of my own inherent vulnerability and the challenge by a friend at the Princeton University concert series Healing with Music to literally put it out there on stage, not just let people know, but to talk about it on stage. Those became the core of what I do and the through line that I was always missing. And what's so beautifully ironic about that to me is that I was so wrapped up, again, in this idea of doing, of making, that I wasn't actually listening to the fact that I have to be human. I was trying to be perfect instead of letting myself be human. And once I started letting myself be human and express that. Everything that I do now has this central through line, has a connection to that. And I think it's much easier for people to understand, which has always been the goal. And
Well,
yeah.
it's not just this album that's symbolic. The Immunity Project,
Yeah.
which it would be helpful to tell about in the tour you're doing, because your concert venues are not the usual concert venues.
That's right. Originally, Immunity was conceived as something that would be on the main stage at Carnegie Hall or other performance arts venues, but we decided to offer it as an add-on to orchestras. When I would go play a concerto with the orchestra, this could be their outreach event for the week. I'll come a day early, you find a long COVID clinic or a hospital, I'll perform Immunity there, just as a side thing. But the very first one that I did at OHSU in Portland was so impactful from the moment I walked into the room and realized this is the first time I share the bond that the audience has among themselves. And I didn't feel like I needed to even perform. We could have just sat there and looked at each other. With something like long COVID that's unfortunately so misunderstood and even taboo in some circles, just being seen and gathering was already strength. Starting there and then sharing my story, sharing a story that's not all about you're going to get better. It's about accepting where you are. Hold on to hope. Let the doctors keep researching, participate, but don't let what you have going on stop you from living a full life. Maybe you just need to redefine what your priorities are. That message resonated so well, and the impact on the clinic and the orchestra was so big that we decided it's not just an add-on. So what we've been doing is touring the project to long COVID clinics, just as its own set of performances. And we've also worked with a lead researcher at Mount Sinai to create questionnaires so that we can collect data on the impact of these performances, which is an incredible insight into performative music gatherings, participatory audience exercises. It's been incredible.
So coming to a COVID clinic, a hospital, or a concert hall near you will be
That's
Joshua
right.
Roman.
Yeah.
We had a lot of music and a few questions. I think we're going to have only time for one or two questions, so I'm going to apologize for that in advance. So I'm going to pick somebody. I'm going to go to you to get the question, and if we could have a microphone for her in the middle. Right over here, right in the middle.
Thanks. Marie Matson from Georgetown University. This is going to be quick. What kind of physician do you treats a long COVID patient?
I have the team that I have at Mount Sinai I would have to sit and think for a while to be able to name them all, because there's a cardiologist, there's a neurologist, there's neuropsychology. There are so many things involved, but my primary long COVID physician actually comes from concussion and athletic performance background. There are a lot of overlap in symptoms with people who have ME/CFS, concussions, any sort of brain injury. So a lot of the people that are doing long COVID tend to come from either other infectious diseases or like Lyme, or the concussion and rehab worlds.
There was a hand way in the back.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Megan Stone. I'm also living with long COVID. It disabled me, and I founded a group called the Long COVID Campaign. So I actually work with your doctor, David Petrino, from Mount Sinai to try to take him to the Hill to meet with our leaders to try to get funding.
Thank you.
And make sure that funding is actually trying to find some solutions for folks like us. Have you had an opportunity to connect with leaders in that way? And I would also ask our moderator at USAID, now that we're seeing data that people actually are getting long COVID all over the world, is it something that you're starting to think about at USAID as a funding need, because it's really impacting health systems globally? Thanks so much.
I'll let you start.
Okay, so I mean, this is a globally demonstrated disease, and in a world where we have, so most of the countries where we work at USAID are low-income countries that are, where mortality rates are, in Africa, 60% of people die before the age of, 60% of deaths in a given year in Africa are before the age of 50. So what we've prioritized are survival first, and yet you want to have the capacity for all of these capabilities. So we don't currently fund long COVID clinics or those kinds of things, and yet what we want to enable are primary care clinics that have mental health capability, physical health capability, and can recognize and diagnose the broad range of capabilities while we carry out this work. And so it's recognized in our mental health strategy, which was just actually released this year.
Thank you. Yeah, for my part, I am, of course, interested in advocacy for long COVID, and I'll just say that I see this as a gateway to a sea change in how we treat ourselves in the medical system generally, because there are so many people impacted that we can't ignore it, first of all. And second of all, so much of it is the kind of unseen disease and condition that tends to get ignored, that ME/CFS has struggled with, fibromyalgia have struggled with for decades. And when you have an opportunity like this, and when you start treating people before we have the drugs to treat this, you're doing very basic paying attention to yourself, paying attention to people around you, and accommodating for what we currently see as weakness. And I think when we do that, it's better for all of us. It makes us slow down, pay attention to the connections we have, reorient our priorities around people, and it makes me think of your book. Like, what's the point of caring for ourselves if we're not focused on the core meaning of life? And to me, that's connection and love. So it's a little, grand dreams, sure, but we need to change. And this is enough people that I think, even if it's just the smallest change, it'll make a big difference.
Could we get you to do one more song to finish out?
Sure.
Let Cindy, the
Yeah,
fellow,
Cindy, oh my gosh.
1830
1830.
is named Cindy.
Yes.
Let Cindy do some talking.
All right, thank you so much. Well, I heard that there's a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall and the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew ya. She tied you to a kitchen chair, she broke your throne and she cut your hair. From your lips she drew the hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. You say I took the name in vain. Well, I don't even know the name, but if I did, well, really, what's it to you? There's a blaze of lights in every word. It doesn't matter which you heard. The holy or the broken. Hallelujah. 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 I did my best. It wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I've told the truth, I didn't come to fool ya. And even though it all went wrong, I'll stand before the Lord of Song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
There is nothing more I can say except thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Atul. Thank you all for being here. What a great, great, great Public Health Grand Rounds. Thank you. And the CDs are out front.